The story has shaped the way most people think about this question for thousands of years. It's in school books, it's in philosophy, it's the instinctive answer almost anyone gives when you ask them. We started wearing clothes because we felt embarrassed. There's one problem. The evidence says the exact opposite is true. Start with the animal that makes no sense. You. Every great ape on this planet is covered in hair. Gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, all of them insulated by a thick coat of fur they were born with. Then there's us, naked, hairless from the neck down, the only primate in existence that has to wrap itself in fabric just to go outside. And we didn't get this way recently. Geneticists can estimate when our ancestors started losing their body hair. The answer is roughly 1.2 million years ago. Long before modern humans, long before language, long before anything you'd call civilization. Something stripped us bare deep in prehistory, and then much later, something made us start covering ourselves back up. Those two things are not the same story. They're separated by over 1 million years. Most people mix them up. So what actually happened? Here's the part that sounds too simple to be true. We started wearing clothes because we were cold, not embarrassed, not modest, cold, wind, rain, a world that was trying to kill a primate that no longer had the fur to handle it. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, roughly 300,000 years ago. Africa is warm, but humans are walkers. We kept moving. North into regions that got cold at night and freezing in winter. Further north into Europe and Central Asia, into conditions that a naked hairless body simply cannot survive. And at some point on that journey, someone picked up an animal hide and held it around their body. That was the beginning. Not modesty, necessity, a survival problem with a practical answer. But how do we actually know when that started? This is where it gets strange, because the oldest surviving piece of clothing in the world is only about 5,500 years old, a leather shoe found in a cave in Armenia. And the oldest surviving woven garment dates to roughly 3000 BCE, a linen dress pulled out of an Egyptian tomb. These aren't the first clothes humans ever made. They're just the oldest ones that didn't decay. Hide, fur, bark, plant fiber, it all rots, which means most of the evidence is gone, which means researchers had to find another way in. They found one. Inside a parasite, clothing lice are different from head lice. Head lice live in your scalp hair. Clothing lice live in fabric, in the fibers of whatever you're wearing. They evolved as a species the moment humans started wearing clothes regularly enough to create a stable new habitat in the fabric itself. A kind of louse that had never needed to exist suddenly had a home. And because scientists can study DNA and calculate how long ago two related species diverged, they can work backwards to the exact moment that home first appeared. In 2011, a researcher named Melissa Toops and her team did exactly that. Her answer? Clothing lice split from head lice at least 83,000 years ago, possibly as far back as 170,000 years ago. That's not the date a single person first wrapped a skin around their shoulders. That's the date when humans were doing it regularly enough, consistently enough, for an entire species of parasite to build its life around us. That's the date of habit, not invention. 170,000 years ago is deep time. It is tens of thousands of years before the major human migrations out of Africa, before the brutal ice ages that pushed people into the harshest climates on Earth, which means by the time humans were expanding north into the cold, they probably weren't learning to use clothing for the first time. They were arriving with a technology they'd already been using for generations. The archaeology tells the same story in stages. Around 120,000 years ago, a cave in Morocco called Contrabandiers starts showing bone tools interpreted as being used for processing hides. By about 73,000 years ago, people at Blombos Cave in South Africa were using bone awls, thin, sharp tools for piercing leather, small holes in soft material, proof that someone was joining pieces of skin together. Then around 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, something new appears in northern Eurasia, eyed needles. This matters more than it sounds. A needle with an eye means thread. Thread means seams. Seams mean fitted clothing, cut and shaped to the body, layered, constructed rather than just draped. That is not a hide held across the shoulders. That's a completely different technology. Researchers argue that eyed needles don't mark the beginning of clothing. They mark the beginning of dress. And then something else happens. Around 30,000 years ago, people in what is now Georgia were working with wild flax fibers, twisting them, knotting them. Some of them died. Not the dull gray of raw plant fiber, actually colored. Around the same time, shell beads start appearing at site after site across Africa and the Middle East, some dating back over 140,000 years. These weren't practical objects. Nobody needed a shell on a string to stay warm. These were ornaments, decorations, statements. And the question of where those ornaments were worn turns out to matter more than you'd think. On bare skin, some of them, on hair, but later almost certainly sewn onto clothing. That shift is the real turning point in the story. The moment you can attach a bead to a garment, clothing stops being purely about the body underneath and starts being about the person inside it. A decorated garment says something. It announces group membership, status, who you are in this camp, who your people are. Before writing, before cities, before any formal system of language, humans had already figured out that the surface of a clothed body was a place where you could broadcast a message to everyone who looked at you. That is not shame. That is the opposite of shame. That is display. So here's what the evidence actually builds toward. Modesty didn't come first. Warmth did. Then came technology, scrapers, awls, needles. Then came fitted construction. Then came fiber. Then much later came meaning. Modesty, fashion, status, ritual, those are not the reasons humans started wearing clothes. They are what humans did with clothes once they already existed. They are the cultural layer built on top of a survival solution, the decoration on top of the insulation. Think about that the next time you get dressed in the morning. Every choice you make, the color, the cut, the signal you're sending to every room you walk into without saying a word. That whole system didn't start because someone felt ashamed. It started because a hairless primate in a cold world needed insulation and was clever enough to take it from another animal. We have been told for thousands of years that we covered ourselves because we were embarrassed by what was underneath. The science says something different. We covered ourselves because the world outside was trying to kill us. And once we survived long enough to decorate the covering, we turned a survival tool into a language. Clothing didn't begin as culture. Culture began as clothing. And somewhere in the last 170,000 years, we forgot which came first.